This video is brought to you by my Patreon subscribers. Thank you for your support, and please keep in mind that this video discusses a number of sensitive subjects.
I think second only to Scientology, Disney is the biggest cult in Hollywood.
It feels like High School Musical continues to build and to grow. It's so crazy. We had to go out and celebrate.
In January, I left the US again. After a wonderful month of visiting family and friends, I got on a plane and flew back to Berlin. It was of course great to see people I loved, but it also felt weird. Like I have this whole life somewhere else, and sometimes I return to find out that things haven't really changed, but they also have. And so I pop in, stop speaking German in my daily life, and then leave again. I remember how my life was, and then I go back to how my life is. Each time I see my husband, it gets harder to say goodbye, but I know we're dealing with the whole long distance thing, and that he'll visit me soon. It feels weird to be in Germany while running a YouTube channel mostly about US American culture, about Disney of all things. But I think I need that distance. I now have an incredibly happy life elsewhere, and I don't plan on moving back anytime soon. But now that I'm away from where I grew up, I think I have the space to understand it better. And truthfully, it's not the first time I've had that happen. In my previous video about High School Musical, I talked about how when the third movie came out, I had just stopped believing in the American dream. I was living in Brazil at the time and had a similar experience to what I have today. My family was only there for 2 years, but with distance from where I grew up, I could see it differently. And that was also when I began understanding how I didn't fit the mold I was told to aspire to. And it just so happened that High School Musical 3 was the perfect counter for that. I was understanding being gay and was dealing with what I now interpret as my first memories of gender dysphoria. And I just wasn't interested anymore in the life that Troy and Gabriella had, the life I had been taught to want. But so much was happening with the franchise during this time. While I was discovering myself, a Brazilian spin-off of High School Musical was in the works. And it wasn't the only spin-off made either. As I mentioned in my last video, High School Musical was a global phenomenon. And now that we've gone through the beginning of the franchise and the first 2 movies, we can talk about the death of High School Musical. Because after this point, it would never be the same.
25-year-old Zac Efron, best known for his role in High School Musical, is making shocking headlines today.
If you have been a Disney fan since way back in the day, you probably remember one of the biggest scandals in 2007.
A lot of these people are surrounded by awful people.
As a franchise, High School Musical was at its peak, leading up to the release of the third movie. The second was not only just as acclaimed as the first, but many fans liked it even more and were anxiously awaiting the next installment. And when it was announced that the third movie would get a theatrical release, the hype only grew. The soundtracks had been on the Billboard charts, merchandise was everywhere, and the stars of the movies were household names. But things were about to change. Nothing lasts forever, and the High School Musical madness would eventually die down. Because, as I've said before, a lot happened between the second and third movies. At a time when the HSM stars were blowing up in popularity, scandal was just around the corner, and though Disney tried to stop it, they would only make it worse. While the fans of High School Musical were growing up and changing alongside the movies, so were the stars. And when you put a teenager into the celebrity spotlight with all of the responsibility, fame, and money that comes with that, it can become overwhelming and even harmful, especially during a time that's so important for self-discovery and expression. That could apply to many former teenage or child stars in pop culture history. But there's a particular significance, usually associated with Disney stars of the late 90s and early 2000s. And in the years since the early 2000s Disney Channel boom, we've also learned about how strict Disney was with their stars.
So working for them in general is interesting. They contract you as a child, right? Basically, you can't do anything that will make you uninsurable. So you can't go surfing, you can't like rollerblade, you can't do like high impact sports, you can't do team sports, you can't do certain things. Unless the executives, I think, like have to really kind of evaluate it case by case.
That behavior wasn't necessarily uncommon in the industry, and like many family-friendly companies, with Disney, there was also an added layer of making sure that what their stars said and did fit the general brand. And that wasn't very new for the company. It's always been very calculated. So, though some may have worked previously on projects that didn't fit the company's general family-friendly image, they weren't really allowed to stray from the brand while representing the Disney Channel. But as much as they wanted to, Disney couldn't control everything.
Zac Efron, best known for his role in High School Musical, is making shocking headlines today. TMZ is reporting the young heartthrob has been treated twice for cocaine addiction. Is teen fame prescription for drug addiction?
In 2013, Zac Efron opened up about his struggle with addiction, saying that he had been to rehab twice and that he struggled with cocaine and alcohol. Though it's unclear when exactly his struggle began, we do know that he was drinking before the third High School Musical came out, and also that being thrust into teen stardom put pressure on him. No matter who you are, you face challenges growing up. You go with your things, you learn, you have to. It's impossible to lead an honest and fulfilling life as a man and not make mistakes and fess up to them when you need to. But it's especially humiliating when they happen to be so public and so scrutinized. When you have success young and you accept the good things, you have to accept all of it. You have to accept the moments of glory, but also a great responsibility. And that responsibility, to some degree, involves being a role model. At the same time, I'm a human being, and I've made a lot of mistakes. I've learned from each one. By using his platform to be open about sobriety, Zac Efron no doubt added an important voice to the discussion about teen stars and the ways in which they're pressured by an industry that both harms them and depends on them. And that can get ugly pretty quickly. Aside from incredibly invasive paparazzi encounters and pressure from studios, there were also scandals, including a completely baseless rumor from 2008 that alleged that Ashley Tisdale contracted HIV during her rhinoplasty procedure. That led to a lot of awful speculation about why she got a nose job and whether or not she was going to die soon, but that was disproven, and it was clarified that the procedure was to fix a deviated septum. Still though, she's since spoken about how difficult the experience was and how it took years to get over the backlash. However, out of all the drama that surrounded the High School Musical films, there was one scandal that mainstream culture just wouldn't let go of. One of the biggest scandals in Disney Channel history began in early September of 2007, not even a month after the release of High School Musical 2. Someone leaked personal photos of Vanessa Hudgens in lingerie and also some nudes. Though the photos were leaked after she turned 18, they had actually been taken years prior, so someone managed to steal and then leak photos of a minor. It was a horrible controversy, but not for the reason you might think. You see, she apologized, and it seems like she was pressured to do so. For some reason, the issue wasn't the person who leaked the photos, but the fact that Hudgens took them in the first place. I want to apologize to my fans, whose support and trust means the world to me. I am embarrassed over this situation and regret having ever taken these photos. I am thankful for the support of my family and friends. Disney released a statement afterwards that said, Vanessa has apologized for what was obviously a lapse in judgment. We hope she's learned a valuable lesson. But that wasn't enough to quiet the mainstream press. If you were tuned in at all to US pop culture in 2007, you know how big the story was.
Hollywood seems to love a good scandal. Now, scandalous pictures of Vanessa Hudgens, the star of that kids' movie High School Musical, just came out about 2 weeks ago. We're told that will probably mean millions for her career.
Disney says they hope she's learned from this. Yeah, next time she'll trim the old Vanessa hedges first.
Another young starlet is fighting to rebuild her image. High School Musical star Vanessa Hudgens has just learned the downside of fame, that few secrets are ever kept in the dark.
Even with the cruel treatment of Hudgens in mainstream culture, you would think that it would have been a brief scandal. But no, this shit went on for a long time. In early 2008, months after it happened, she issued a statement saying that she was no longer interested in talking about it. but it still continued. A second nude photos scandal happened in August of 2009, and the narrative just kept on going.
Before I do the Choice Hotties, can I just say what everybody in this room is thinking but nobody has said? Where's Vanessa Hudgens? Girl, you got to keep your clothes on!
Vanessa Hudgens wasn't the only Disney star to get scrutinized like that. Another big photo scandal from the Disney Channel was when Miley Cyrus did a photo session with Annie Leibovitz in 2008, and one of the photos was criticized for being risque and it caused nationwide outrage. Similarly, Miley apologized, but 10 years later she retracted the apology with a tweet saying, "I'm not sorry. F*** you." During the photo scandals, Vanessa Hudgens had been quite open about how awful the whole experience was for her. Whenever anybody asks me would I do nudity in a film, if I say that it's something I'm not comfortable with, they're like, bullshit, you've already done it. If anything, it makes it more embarrassing because that was a private thing. It's screwed up that somebody screwed me over like that. At least some people are learning from my mistake. As you can see though, she still framed it as a mistake. This would fade away years later, long after she stopped working with Disney. But when the first scandal happened in 2007, she was gearing up to shoot High School Musical 3, which was slated to be released the following year. Since she was one of the leads in the film, it seems that protected her from potentially losing work with the mouse, and the aforementioned statement about her learning from her mistakes was seen back then as them supporting her through the scandal. Since the Me Too movement began, there has been a lot of cultural progress with the mainstream being more empathetic to victims of sexual abuse and harassment. And in retrospect, it's sad to think about how this scandal happened at what now seems like the end of an era in US American feminism. Just 4 years after the second leaked photos scandal happened, California would be one of the first states to pass a law on revenge porn, something that might have applied to this scandal if it existed back then. For me, this whole situation is a reminder of how harsh the American dream can be. Sure, it's possible for some to have social mobility and to achieve their dreams, but that almost always comes at a cost. To this day, Vanessa Hudgens is still very open about how traumatic the experience was. It was a really traumatizing thing for me. It's really f***ed up that people feel like they're entitled enough to share something that personal with the world. As an actor, you completely lose all grip on your own privacy, and it's really sad. It feels like that shouldn't be the case, but unfortunately, if enough people are interested, they're going to do everything they can to get to know as much about you as they can, which is flattering, I guess, but then people take it too far and end up divulging things that should be personal. High School Musical was an international phenomenon, and not only were the films shown around the world, but there were also different versions created for different countries. The titles of the Mexican, Argentinian, and Brazilian films were the same. High School Musical: The Challenge. The story slightly varied from country to country. In the Mexican version, the sport played is soccer, in the Argentinian one, it's rugby, and in the Brazilian one, it's futsal. All 3 movies revolve around a battle of the bands that becomes a central conflict. Surprisingly, these were not based off of the first High School Musical movie, but instead one of the entries from the High School Musical Book Series, which, by the way, there were 19 books released under the High School Musical name. But this book was from a specific series called Stories from East High that referenced the plot points of the main films but were also totally separate things. So I figured if I'm going to be spending this much of my precious time on Earth thinking so much about High School Musical, I have to figure out what's in these books. So I got 3 of them. I got 2 from the Stories from East High series, and then I got 1 that's the novelization of the second movie. Unfortunately, I could not get the English versions in time for the video, so I got the German ones, which are super fun. So we have Neues von der East High 3 and 7. So we're gonna start with 3 because this is actually my favorite. These are written outside of the movies. It's just giving you an idea of what happens at East High in their universe. They're just little stories that are honestly just like super generic stories that just happen to have the characters' names in them. And that was a perfect move for Disney at the time, because like I've spoken about, High School Musical was just so ridiculously popular during this time. And especially when the target audience was like middle schoolers or elementary school kids, it's such a good idea to have like these books that are very easy to read with just their characters. And for a lot of children who were learning how to read, it was probably very appealing to want to read books with Gabriella and Troy and Taylor and Chad and all the Wildcats. thoughts. I think these books are very interesting and they do add something, so I want to share them with you because I have some thoughts. So this book is centered around poetry. They all have to write poetry for a class presentation. The stakes are sort of high. I mean, Chad, for instance, has to get a 3 to be able to stay on the basketball team because Coach Bolton has said that his athletes have to maintain a certain level of academic standing. And Chad is very particularly worried that he'll get a 4 or a 5. And so he's very curious about how to write poetry, how to do it well. And that's just like the theme of the book. The theme of the book is just poetry. They talk about Shakespeare, so it's just poetry themed. And it's very fun. For example, at the beginning of the book, Gabriella gives Troy a poem. This is page 2, so right off the bat, they're writing poetry. Gabriella says, "Oh, schlaf nicht ein, Troy Bolton. Bleib wach, das rate ich dir. Wenn du noch einmal wegpennst, doch nachsitzen bald dir. Mit poetischem Gruß, Gabriella." So right off the bat, we're off to an amazing start. I love this. And of course, Sharpay has a very distorted idea of what it means to be an established poet. Die Englisch-Aufgabe ist ein Gedichtwettbewerb. Die Gewinnerin kommt in die Zeitung. Weißt du, was das bedeutet? Mein Name und mein Foto kommen in die Zeitung. Mein Gedicht wird veröffentlicht. Alle werden furchtbar neidisch auf mich sein. Ach, Ruhm ist so süß. Ich kann ihn schon schmecken. So süß. I love this. However, one of the interesting things about Sharpay is that in the sort of High School Musical extended universe, whenever I see a different person write Sharpay as a character or just like talk about who she is, they always seem to take a different approach. Like in the movies, I feel like she's bitchy, she's like sassy, but she also has a heart and she's also very likable in like her bitchiness. In these books, they kind of just make her very unlikable, very cruel, which I guess is part of her character, but it feels different. But that does bring me to a very important part of these books, which is that they were written by different people. Certain authors did multiple ones, but there were many authors that Disney hired to write these books. So this one was written by Alice Alfonsi, and number 7 was written by Catherine Hapka. So I don't know, there are some little differences that I'll point out, but one of the notable ones that I noticed is that in this book, they refer to the musical that they did in the first movie as Twinkletown, which is how it's referred to in German. There's no E at the end of town, but I just assume that's because that's a very specific Old English type of spelling that wouldn't really be as well known. And so they just say Twinkletown in English. However, in book number 7, it's referred to as Tinseltown, which is not how it's called in German. And I find that super fascinating because if you remember from my last High School Musical video, David Simpatico, the playwright who adapted High School Musical for the stage, said that he believed the name Twinkletown was in reference to Tinseltown. So I wonder why that happened, like why there was this inconsistency. Maybe it was just like translating it. Again, I don't know if this is in the English version of the 7th book. If you have it, please comment and let me know. I find it very interesting that they have the name wrong in one of the books. So anyway, one of the big plot lines in this book in particular is that Gabriella finds Troy's notebook and there's a poem in it which goes, Mit dir zusammen rast mein Herz. Wir haben Spaß zu zweien. Nichts hört uns auf. Das ist kein Scherz. Ich hoffe, so wird's immer sein. And Gabriella's like, oh, it's so cute. Until she realizes that the title of the poem is Ariel. So Gabriella immediately is just like, oh my God, who is this bitch? Like, he's writing about this other girl. And she continues reading the poem, which says, Wenn ich einmal traurig bin, hol ich dich ganz speziell. Nach neuer Freund stritt gleich mein Sinn. Das kannst nur du, Ariel. So Gabriella is convinced that there's another girl that Troy likes, and she is furious, and that sets her sort of plotline in motion. She ends up writing a poem later on that addresses this and causes more drama, which I love. I'm not going to read all of the poems, but each character has their own poem that just like expresses who they are, and it's very good. Definitely check this out. And in true like 2000s middle school book fashion, there's like color photos in the middle of the book that have specific like tips and like maybe photos from the movie and other sort of stuff. So one of my favorite parts of this is Sharpay's salon, in which she not only gives beauty tips, but also gives a very specific recipe for a face mask. I thought it would be a good idea to do this while I'm just doing my morning routine. And so John's here with me to assist. and we're gonna be doing the official Sharpay face mask. So it says 15 milliliters whole milk natural yogurt, no half fat, and 15 milliliters fluid honey. So I went out and got the Rewe Bio yogurt, which is organic. And then I also got the Ja Blütenhonig zart fließend. So I guess that's fluid enough for Sharpay. So I'm gonna mix it together. I just wanna clarify that most of the time, John and I eat vegan generally. Oh yeah, fruit salad. So I thought I would really change it up and break that momentarily to follow Sharpay because I need to know if her beauty tips work. So this is roughly what I think it's supposed to look like. Okay, so we already put a bit on, forgot to start recording, but we're just gonna keep going. I think I think it's supposed to look white, like pasty. So this is kind of, as I said, John and I mostly eat vegan. So this is a very interesting phenomenon with me slathering dairy product onto my face. The smell is not my fave, but trust the process. I know Sharpay knows what she's doing, and I certainly need a better skincare routine, as you can see from my skin. I did not think I was gonna be doing this when I decided, oh, it would be fun to make a video looking at High School Musical, and that video became 2 videos, and I am now slathering dairy on my f***ing face for this High School Musical thing. So now we have the finishing touch, which is cucumber slices. So Sharpay says these prevent eye circles, which I think she means eye bags. Okay. So this is the final look.
Beautiful.
I think I'm a beauty YouTuber now, and we are gonna take 15 minutes. It says leave these on for 15 minutes and then we take them off. Okay, so I've taken off the mask, and my review is that I'm not sure if this has given me any insight into Sharpay's character, other than the fact that I guess she slathers dairy yogurt on her face on what appears to be a regular basis. So take that as you will. It was not my fave. As you can see, I changed outfits because a bit of it got on my shirt, and I do not like the smell of dairy. But the important thing is whether or not my skin looks good. So for that, I turn to John. What do you think? Does it?
I think your skin looks dairy fresh, like you just got off the farm. And I say, yay to Sharpay's beauty treatment.
Thank you, John. So yeah, that's Sharpay's salon. One of my favorite parts of this book is Martha's poem. So Martha famously is the math girl who likes hip hop. She likes to pop and lock and jam and break. And I love her storyline in this because she loves hip hop. And so that means that her poem has to be a rap. So, ich reime schon seit Jahren und zwar gern. So kann ich mir auch Sachen besser merken. Zum Beispiel die Astronomievorlesung gestern. Martha sprang auf und trug ihren Freestyle-Rap vor. I'm sorry, this feels necessary. Martha wrote a rap, so I have to rap it, right? Mit dem Systemkind, die Sonne glut so heiß, 2 Millionen Grad Celsius, das treibt den Schweiß. Aber die Sonne steht nicht allein am Himmelszelt, hat außerdem 9 Kumpel und die sind unsere Welt. Der alte Merker rückt gern ganz nah an sie heran. Ein winzig kleiner Bursche, der hat es gerne warm. Oh, oh my fucking God. Oh my fucking God. This was a great investment. I feel like I'm getting a lot out of this. I'm really glad I did this. So Martha keeps going. I'm not going to read the rest of it, but just know that everyone loves it. Als sie fertig war, kam von überall wilder Applaus und lauter Jubel. Hey, erkannte Chad überrascht. Martha ist gar nicht schlecht. And then also, it goes to the next chapter, chapter 7, and they're still talking about Martha's rap. Sie ist ziemlich gut, bemerkte Ryan. This book rules. I love this book. So it continues. They give presentations. Gabrielle is losing it over this aerial poem stuff, and she ends up writing a poem that is very specifically directed at Troy. Ich sehe dich vor mir stehen, wie du mir ganz genügst. Ich höre dich reden, sagen, was du dir wünschst, du lügst. Girl is going through it. She is so pissed. Of course, Sharpay does a really great one. She does a collab with Kelsey. It's a long story. Schuhe, Schuhe liebe ich sehr in Stoff und Form und Stil. Boots, Pumps, Sandalen, Moccasins, Leder und Krokodil. I love reading the poetry of all the people. I feel like I'm really learning more about the High School Musical universe by reading these books. So if you really want to get like the full picture of what's happening at East High, you have to read these books. One of my favorites as well is Troy and Jason and Zeke and Chad all do a basketball-themed poem. Ihr alle hier erkennt mich als eure Klassenclown. Für jeden Scherz zu haben, da könnt ihr echt drauf bauen. This is incredible. I'm so glad you're here with me. Could you imagine if I just like was holding onto this on my own? There was like a week period after I read these where I was just like walking around and I was just thinking like, they don't know. Like the friends I talk to, they've seen High School Musical, but they haven't read the third High School Musical Stories from East High book and know what Chad's poetic ambition is. Der Mannschaftskapitän, der hat's nicht immer leicht. Vor dem Spiel finde ich oft schon wirklich, dass es reicht. So they love basketball, they love each other, bros just being bros, no homo, as we've established in the first movie. Yeah, so Chad, Troy, Zeke, and Jason end up winning the main title. But then afterwards, Troy confronts Gabriella about her poem, which was very clearly aimed at him. That was like a targeted attack in terms of like high school relationship drama. So Troy asks her about it. Gabriella, was ist denn eigentlich los? Warum hast du denn dein eigenes Gedicht nicht gelesen? Das über deine heimliche Flamme. Troys machte große Augen. Meine was? Na, deine Flamme, diese Ariel. Ich weiß, dass du eine andere magst. Ariel ist doch kein Mädchen, rief er. Das ist der Name meines ersten Skateboards. So, plot twist. She thought it was the name of a girl and it was a fucking skateboard. Why did Troy name his skateboard Ariel? This is some important lore that we're learning. So if you did not know that Troy's first skateboard was named Ariel, bitch, pick up these fucking books. You have to get your head in the game, okay? Before we move on to the 7th book, I just want to quickly go over this one. I don't know, it's just the second movie. I mean, it's not that notable or interesting. Just like the other ones, it has a middle section with like color photos of the movie. It's kind of interesting in the sense that there are shots that vaguely represent shots in the movie, but they're clearly shot with like different cameras or just from like different angles. So as you can see, there's like, I don't know, different angles and different things, including this hilarious one. This one of Troy and Gabriella singing in Every Day. It just looks like someone was spying on them from the top of a building. It's incredible. But yeah, let's go on to the 7th book. I'm just going to be upfront and say that this one is not as interesting as the poetry one, but it's still fun to read. I mean, it kind of reads like a self-insert fanfic where someone just like writes themselves as a character who interacts with all these characters, because there's a new girl, Ashley, who Gabriella takes under her wing, and that causes some drama. Basically, Ashley shit talks Gabriella to Sharpay. Troy tries to tell Gabriella what's going on. She doesn't really believe him. He thinks that Ashley's using Gabriella. It all works out in the end. It's High School Musical. I was kind of upset because the way that the cover looks, it makes you think that the story is going to be about like Ryan and Gabriella. So when I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, like, will this give me more lore about their friendship? But no, it doesn't. Something interesting about this is that it was released in between the second and third movies. And in it, it references Gabriella having been the lead role in the school musical, but it doesn't clarify which musical she was the lead role in. Later, in the middle portion, that's where it says Tinseltown, like I mentioned earlier, but it seems that the musical mentioned earlier is a different musical. So that is interesting, unless all of these books are just set in between the first and second movies. But then I would find it weird if it was released between the second and third movie, because it also, the plot centers around a party that Sharpay is having at her parents' country club. And the country club is first introduced at the second movie. There is a possibility that it was set between the first and second movies. Sharpay and Ryan clearly had been going to the country club beforehand, but it seems like in the second movie, the characters first become aware of the country club when they go to work there. So that leads me to believe it actually takes place during the second and third movies, and there's just another musical the school does that happens between that. And maybe that's Tinseltown? Some other interesting things to note from this book. There is a famous pop star in the High School Musical universe named Trina Chica. She is billed as like a double platinum pop star, she's world famous, but she's also going to perform at Sharpay's party, which in concept sounds hilarious. I mean, why would this international pop star just go to New Mexico to perform at Sharpay's party? But then you realize oh yeah, her parents do have a lot of money, so I guess they could pay whatever her high booking fee is or something. And Sharpay's just hyping this up. For example, at the party, they have an ice sculpture of Trina Chica, and Sharpay's just oh yeah, she's gonna be there. And it turns out that Sharpay dupes them by just having a live stream of Trina Chica's Houston concert. And so I love that. Get people to come to your party by just straight up lying to them. In the movies, I feel like Sharpay was more charming or just lovable. She had plans and she was manipulative, but it wasn't just weird like that. What does she have to gain from just straight up lying to people about someone being at her party? So many people show up and she's just not there. It is interesting though, because it does show what happens, how a character can change or how their personality can be different when another writer is writing them. So that being said, that's just a little taste of what happens in the High School Musical books. So let's get back to the movies. So the spin-off films retained the general template of the series, but had a few changes. The Gabriella character is just a classmate who has changed over the summer, not a transfer student. And like I said, the focus is on the battle of the bands instead of a musical. High School Musical had already been a huge success, so having a localized version of the film was a big deal. And the build-up to some of the spin-offs was done via reality shows, where contestants competed and the finalists were chosen for the movie. This reality show trend would also be introduced to the US market via High School Musical: Get in the Picture, which was supposed to build hype for the third movie coming out later that year.
All will create the ultimate complement to High School Musical 3 and become a part of the High School Musical family.
Instead of getting a feature role in the movie, the winner would get a record deal with Disney and get to record the song Just Getting Started that would be featured in the credits of High School Musical 3. But the show kind of flopped and it was never really spoken about again, though pieces of it still exist online. But anyway, the reality shows in Mexico, Argentina, and Brazil were all successful, and though High School Musical 2 technically had been shown at the AMC movie theater in California's downtown Disney, these international spin-offs were technically the first in the franchise to be made for theaters. And since the Argentinian version premiered in July of 2008, it was the first one to make it onto the big screen. I haven't really talked about the Chinese spin-off yet because it was released in 2011, after the release of the third movie. Though, like the other spin-off films, it doesn't really have to do much with the original US movies. It's set in Shanghai, and it follows the story of a girl who works at her family's crayfish business. She eventually meets a guy at a karaoke club, and they become singing partners. But drama happens when a jealous rich girl, basically the Sharpay of the story, causes havoc before the school's singing competition that they're preparing for. There isn't any plot point about sports, but the main character does feel pressure from her parents to focus on her studies, and that becomes the main conflict: school versus singing. It was called High School Musical China College Dreams, and it was not well received. In fact, it was critically panned, with one film critic, Derek Ellie, being pretty specific in why he thought it failed. Following Argentinian and Brazilian versions, China gets its very own film spin-off of the 2006 American TV movie. And reflecting the bookends on its English title, Disney High School Musical China is more Disney than China. Given its disastrous performance at the mainland box office this summer, it's a reasonable guess there won't be a DHSMC 2. More likely, in years to come, the movie will be discussed by cinema historians and even shown in lecture halls, as an example of Hollywood's continuing inability to learn any lessons in cultural transplantation. More problematically, it's set in a kind of Grease meets Clueless universe peopled by Chinese aping American kids that only occasionally intersects with recognizable life in a modern mainland city, Shanghai made to look as anonymous as possible. High School Musical China brings up a lot of questions about what it means to adapt a story for another culture, and when bringing US American properties to the country, Disney has faced this question before. While the spinoff was being made, Disney had already opened Hong Kong Disneyland and were working on Shanghai Disneyland, and were pretty open about how they wanted to be careful about not just copying and pasting the US park onto Chinese culture.
This is a landmark occasion, and it is a major step in our journey to create a destination that will be authentically Disney and distinctly Chinese.
However, with High School Musical China, it doesn't seem like they were successful. And I think even though the other spin-off films had more success, there's definitely criticism to be had for just putting the name High School Argentina into a movie and considering it to be set in Argentina. To talk about that though, we have to talk more about US imperialism. But I don't speak Spanish, Portuguese, or Mandarin, so my only understanding of these films and critiques about them is just through reviews. And frankly, I don't know if that's enough to give my take. But we can look at another international version of High School Musical. I didn't grow up with the German dubs of High School Musical, but at least I can understand them and have more cultural context. To make sure I get everything though, I put out an open call for subscribers who did grow up with the German dub to email me and to talk about their experiences. I got a bunch of really helpful responses, so a special thanks to everyone who sent in an email. The German dub of High School Musical, and for ease I'll just focus on the first one, is like many of the 21 other dubs made for international release. The idioms are different than the English, the slang is changed, but overall it's just a translation, not an adaptation like the spin-off films. And they did a pretty good job. The dialogue is translated, but the songs are kept in English. Recently I was getting coffee with someone, and when I told them about working on this video, they said that they watched some Disney films growing up, but never watched High School Musical because it was too American. And I think they're right. As I've said, High School Musical is nothing if not a patently US-American story. But what does that mean when you have children in Germany growing up with movies from the US? Well, let's talk about some German history. After the atrocities committed by Nazi Germany in World War II, the Allied forces decided to split the country into several occupied zones between the Soviet Union, France, Britain, and the US. The capital city of Berlin was also divided into 4 sectors. But at the time, there was a divide between the Allied forces. Though they both fought against Nazi Germany in the war, the US and the Soviet Union had already been ideologically opposed because of the capitalist and communist systems in the countries. This tension eventually led to the Cold War, and Germany officially became a divided country in 1949, with the western part called the Federal Republic of Germany and the eastern part being the German Democratic Republic. For simplicity's sake, they were also referred to as West Germany and East Germany. And with military occupation comes cultural influence. West Germany was also supported by the US Marshall Plan during its economic growth post-World War II. And in Berlin, US-American influence could be seen in the city, specifically in the American sector, from radio to food to infrastructure to film and, of course, music. There was resistance to that, but as Hollywood and US culture in general were having a huge influence globally, the younger generation began taking notice. And with US influence also came Disney. But you wouldn't find the company in the East. Disney meant the US, so it didn't really have a presence on a widespread official level. But there was still US influence in the country. I'm not interested in diving too far into the politics of the West and the East, and I don't want anyone to think I'm talking about strict binaries. I think it's possible to talk about the lack of efficient denazification in the West and also the oppressive surveillance state developing in the East. And queerphobia existed in both countries in many ways. It's very complicated, and I'm just trying to give a brief overview because, don't forget, this is a video about High School Musical. Anyway, during the Cold War, Germany became a huge point of contention between the US and the Soviet Union, and specifically Berlin became a huge symbol of the conflict. And by this point, the East German government had built a wall dividing the city, preventing East German citizens from entering West Germany. Decades later, in 1989, the Berlin Wall fell for many political, social, and economic reasons, but many see that incident as the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union and subsequently the Cold War. And when Germany was reunited in 1990, the new country looked towards the future, and Reunification Day is still a national holiday. But it's also more complicated. Some people were critical of the reunification for a variety of reasons, but one of them being that the new country retained the capitalist system from the West. And culturally, discussions about US influence and what it represents are still ongoing, especially as the US's cultural dominance worldwide has only grown in the last few decades. And for many, Disney can represent that. In France, allegations of cultural imperialism were one of the reasons why Disneyland Paris had trouble finding success in its early years. But even then, Disney still means different things in different countries, and trends like Donaldism in Northern Europe show that the company's characters have specific followings that just don't really exist in the US. So Disney's international expansion has had a lasting effect, and what exactly that means will probably change depending on who you ask. I didn't grow up in Germany, so I can't really say how it felt to be growing up with the High School Musical films in the early 2000s. So I reached out to my subscribers, got a lot of responses, and started to understand more about High School Musical's influence. In general, I had a very dreamy image of the USA and American schools, especially as a child, and I suspect that HSM and other American media for children and teenagers had a big influence on that. Especially from HSM 2 on, you get the impression that everyone at East High is friends with each other, except Sharpay, of course. The team spirit and sense of community that is conveyed was something I really liked as a kid. especially since I had a lot of problems with my classmates in my first years of school and didn't feel accepted. HSM was a retreat for me into another, friendlier world. And that's the image I had of the US, a place where anything seems possible. If Troy could achieve anything he wanted in the US through enough perseverance and optimism, then I could too. At least that's how I thought at the time. I could have never imagined the story of HSM in Germany because it wouldn't have had the same magic. American schools were a colorful place for me, full of nice, interesting people, where anyone could achieve anything. If I had been asked as a child if I wanted to move to the US and attend an American high school, I would have said yes immediately. In the meantime, however, I have largely discarded this optimistic view of the USA. I now know that HSM does not represent the reality of the American school system. That said, I still feel strong nostalgia for the franchise, and to this day, more than 15 years later, still enjoy listening to the songs. It's still kind of a sanctuary for me, except that today I'm better able to distinguish between reality and fiction. I know now that I wouldn't want to live in the United States. The promised equal opportunities and many possibilities just don't exist for everyone, and for me the feeling of safety is not there. The gun laws alone, but also the insufficient health insurance, would deter me. I got a bunch of other emails, and many of them shared a similar sentiment. The High School Musical franchise presents such a romantic image of the US and specifically the American dream that it blurs the line between what is real and what isn't. And while I don't think that media, and especially Disney, necessarily has to represent real life, when people grow up mistaking fantasy for reality, well, that's when things can get complicated. High School Musical was at its peak when the third movie came out on October 24th, 2008. Originally titled Haunted High School Musical, it eventually became a heartfelt film about senior year, looking at how the Wildcats have changed since the first movie and what their future holds. It also had a widespread theatrical release, which was a pretty big step forward and showed just how popular the series was at the time. But as I said before, it was technically not the first in the franchise to appear in theaters. The movie took the best things about the franchise and made them even better. There's incredible choreography, top-notch songwriting, and a more ambitious scope. There's really a lot going on.
And that's all I really need. Come on, make me strong. It's time to turn it up. Game on.
This movie also has an incredibly iconic Sharpay and Ryan song, which is honestly a standout for the entire franchise. It really takes the unapologetic musical theater to a whole new level. I also have to mention that for some reason, Ryan is paired with Kelsey the composer, and it really comes out of nowhere, especially given what we now know about Ryan being gay. But I guess with that context, it also can make sense that they'd be beards for each other. But anyway, this movie also has probably the darkest song in the trilogy, in which Troy has a crisis about what he should do with his life. But when the movie first came out, I didn't care about it. I was 13 and I had just stopped believing in the American dream. I didn't really care that there was a happy ending. I didn't think that applied to me. When I began coming out to people, things started to change. I was bullied for being gay before I even knew I was, but once I admitted it, it was almost like it hurt more. Like the people who made fun of me were right. They knew who I was before I did. And so when someone told me that they'd give me their father's shotgun if I used it to kill myself, I agreed. I had other plans in the works in case that didn't go through. A friend found out about one of them and reported me to a teacher at our school. That friend saved my life. And I never fell back in love with the American dream. Ten years later, I was living in Berlin. On a whim, I decided to watch High School Musical 3 again. After all, I honestly hadn't seen it since it came out. And I was so surprised. I was so taken aback by how much love went into it and how well done it was. How did I miss that? It would be a while until I came to terms with being trans and started understanding my teenage turmoil about being gay in a whole new way. But by that point, High School Musical was dead. The third movie seemingly set up more sequels or spin-offs by introducing new characters who could presumably replace the main cast after graduation. But it seems like Disney didn't really want to go through with that. I mean, the characters weren't really fan favorites. So the only spin-off ended up being Sharpay's Fabulous Adventure, a largely forgettable film about Sharpay's life after high school. Some notable things about it are that it has one of Austin Butler's early roles, I like some of the songs in it, and oddly enough, this is the only Disney Channel original movie I know of to have an explicitly transphobic joke.
I will do better.
Forget it, okay? Aside from catching some shade from the shadow cast by your Madam's apple, you're of no use to me.
After that, High School Musical was officially dead, but its impact was still felt. Shows like Glee and films like Pitch Perfect showed the influence, and the franchise set the stage for an entire line of Disney Channel original movie musicals that's still going to this day. And when it was announced that there would be a spin-off Disney Plus series set in a fictional version of the high school where the movies were filmed, the fandom was reignited, this time with the addition of all the people who grew up with High School Musical, but were too young to have seen it when it first premiered. I think the show is genuinely one of the best things to come out of Disney Plus. It has an incredible cast, clearly takes influence from Glee, which again took influence from High School Musical, and perhaps the most important thing, it has some incredible queer representation. To go from repressed queer coding to a variety of characters who are unapologetically queer, well, I think it's a testament to how much US media and culture has changed since 2006.
So I learned something new about myself last night. It is possible that I have a crush on Valerie, the choreographer, and all that that implies. I suppose you could say my dating pool got a little bigger. And so did my heart. And so did my world.
But as much as I love the show, it's just not the same. The High School Musical I grew up with is long gone. And what's been put in its place is a different thing. Something that I do genuinely love, but a different thing. When High School Musical 3 came out, I was lost. I had some idea of who I was, but I had no idea how I would fit into a world which, as far as I knew at the time, didn't want me there. And honestly, looking back, I can clearly see how much the first two movies helped me, how it felt to empathize with those characters. But I also remember the disappointment that came with the third movie when they had a happy ending while I was still struggling. I still have a lot of uncertainty in my life, but there's some comfort in being able to look back, to reach out to my past self and say, it's okay. I understand what you were going through. Maybe one day there will be another High School Musical movie. But for now, I'm fine without one. Some stories don't need to be continued.